Hello, welcome to RP-0 America. So I did a little background research, and it looks like the Gemini is drawing the right amount of electric charge, I, but the battery mass to electric charge ratio seems to be off by about an order of magnitude, by about 10. So I set the battery size to be about the mass it should be. I looked up some historical sources, and the battery for Gemini with just batteries was 184 kilograms, about that. And so that's what I set this to be, even though it has 1/10 of the electric charge it should have. So in order to do the duration mission, I will have to cheat the electric charge, and I'll look into the formula that's used to kind of define how much electric charge and mass a procedural battery should have. I should probably open up, whoa, right, there we go, Smart ASS, so I can steer myself up into space. All right. So we have upgraded the, you might, if you recognize the facilities, we've upgraded the astronaut center, and so we will be able to do our first EVA, and we'll also do a 2-day duration. That's the plan. So it should be the last Gemini flight of this era, where we're using this really basic Gemini, which this isn't actually the Gemini service module. It doesn't have an engine for thrusting forwards. It doesn't have fuel cells. Currently, I'm still working on unlocking the technology which will give us fuel cells, the FASA actual service module. In the meantime, we're flying early Gemini flights, since we didn't fly very many Mercury flights with just one pilot, with just one crew member. Just checking the brightness there. We didn't fly very many of those at all, so I believe Kathy Henderson was the first person sent up during one of those missions, and she wasn't in space very long, but she was alone, and now she's getting to go up again with our first scientist, who's hopefully going to make it into space today. So let's see how. So I switched engines. I realized that the Dash 5 engine upper stage that I was using had only a slightly shorter burn time, but the critical bit was that the additional burn time for this is what allows it to, it's 3 minutes versus about 3 minutes 8 seconds or 3 minutes 9 seconds of burn time, which is crucial when I'm using a fixed tank like this. So there we go. The battery here for this is about 150 kilograms, whereas if I had actually given it the right amount of electric charge, it would have massed like 1.5 tons, which is a lot of payload, too much payload to be able to throw up on a Gemini, or sorry, on a Titan II booster. So the capsule should draw about 2 EC, so 2 kilowatts, about 2.1 kilowatt draw, which means 2 units of 2 EC per second. And if you do the math, to convert that to say how much it would need to draw in a day, it's just 2 units per second. So just ignore that for the moment. So let's just multiply time. So 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and then 24 hours in a day. So that comes out to 60 times 60 times 24, and then from there, so that's how much just say one draw would take per day. We actually have a draw of 2, and for 2 days, so times by 2 and then by 2 again, to get how much electric charge would be required in order to have a 2-day duration. All right, we're just about to do stage burnout, and again I forgot to set set this for hot staging. It looks like we've got not too bad at all of an ascent profile this time. So perhaps we will have some other, maybe an engine failure, or we will have a clean mission. So you may have also noticed that the craft looks a little different than it did before, and that's because I've thrown on some solar panels. Just to, Gemini never ever actually used solar panels. It went from just batteries, and then it pioneered the use of fuel cells in a crewed vehicle. I probably should have ignited first. It's the whole point of hot staging. Anyway, and so in this case, because we just have batteries and we don't have the fuel cell yet, I threw on some solar panels so we can kind of investigate how viable that is. So it's showing the power draw in watts, which is a nice new feature that we now have as of a version or 2 ago of KSP and Realism Overhaul. So a watt, so 1 electric charge is a kilowatt second, so would be 1,000 watts. So this would be 0.06 of an electric charge per second, which isn't infinitesimal, which isn't meaningless, because we're drawing 2 whole units, so we're drawing, say, 2,000 of these every, there we go, let's just pitch up a little bit, just manage these times so I actually end up in space, which will be ideal. So not an infinitesimal amount of power, and I had to use pretty decent sized solar panels to to be able to create some power for this craft, but they're fairly light solar panels, so I figured it was worth it to increase the duration of the mission. Just do a bit of experimentation with using solar panels to augment the batteries, which in reality would probably be a bit useful. I think the first craft to actually use solar panels were the Soviets with the Soyuz. There were many different versions of the Soyuz, and props to Raider Nick and everybody else who has made mods with Soyuz in them, because there's so many different versions of the Soyuz as they evolved and developed the technology for different mission parameters. I actually read a book recently about the history of the Soyuz program, and there's a kind of an early design where they could have done a lunar flyby potentially. It was designed with a whole bunch of launches of something very similar. It was still called Soyuz, except sometimes it would just launch a translunar injection stage, only very partially fueled, and they'd send up a couple of fuel carriers to fill that up, and then attach it to another Soyuz. So with 7 or 8 launches of an R7, with the kind of the standard human-rated Soviet launch vehicle at the time and now, they would have been able to do a 2 or 3 crew flyby of the moon, which is really neat. I kind of wanted to design that to actually build something like that. So I might do that if I do a Soviet playthrough at some point in the future. And there's a lot of mods that are have really nice Soviet parts and everything now, so I could very well end up doing that. All right, so everything is looking pretty well. The engine is running. Let me just check ahead. Because I switched the variant from the Dash 5 to the Dash 7, only some of my experience with that previous engine carries forward. It does that calculation just once. So the first time you use say the next version of the engine, the Dash 7, it takes a fraction of the experience you had on the Dash 5, any previous version that will contribute. And it just does that as a one-time calculation. So now if I use the Dash 5, the other version of this engine, for something else, it wouldn't contribute to the experience of this. If I remember and understood how Agathorn described that, the creator of Test Flight, if I understood him correctly. We are approaching orbit. We probably need to pitch down, since this time is actually still increasing a bit. Only 20 seconds left on this stage. We're going to have a lot more delta V than we need. Maybe my previous battery was actually heavy. Like, this is a pretty light version of the Gemini, what I have, because it's just meant for tests, a very short duration version. There we go. Let's level out, because I saw this come down, so pretty close to level. Oh, and all right. So it's not an ideal orbit. It's a little high, particularly for this craft that can't change its orbit. So that means I'm kind of limited to coming down around this node. Whereas, say, if this was more circular, like if it was 160 by 200, it would be a bit easier for me to deorbit. Let's see, so this is the low point, so this is kind of where I'm going to have to come back down. Okay, so in the meantime, let us drop off the stage we used. Yeah, so we had a pretty good amount of delta V left over, 4 seconds remaining burn time even. All right, so let's just drop that off. And everything else in this is pretty much the same. No, do not destroy, decouple. There we go. And I can't really thrust away from it. I probably should have put some small solids on this so it can move itself away from me. All right, let's see. What do we want to do with this now? So I don't want to pop this cap yet because it'll push me back into this, and right now I want to separate myself. All right. No electric charge. So yeah, this is going to come down. So, all right, so keep an eye on this number. What I want to do is just kind of keep an eye on the sun. Where are you, the sun? There we go. And change my orientation to bring this number down, because this is showing how much power we're drawing per second. And so I want to orient myself in relation to the sun to minimize how much power we're drawing off batteries and maximize how much power we're actually drawing off. Actually, right, I don't think I can do that. All right, so I'm not going to be cheating with persistent rotation. I don't think, because it doesn't seem to be allowing me to recently. Oh, and I'm probably going to end up bumping into that. Fair enough. Right, so we're currently drawing 1.88 units of electric charge. Oh, and we actually might end up in the shadow of this. Yeah, we did bump into it, so I'm just going to warp time a little bit so we can get away from it. And when you're at time warp, of course, it's not doing rigid body calculations, so they can just pass right through each other. Hopefully we're not in the, oh, I think we are in the shadow. Blocked by, yeah. All right, so I'll wait even longer until that wanders away in beautiful free fall. There we go. So I don't think we're in the shadow of that anymore. And this is accurate because we're at 10x. So this is basically the same number just with the decimal moved, right? 1.9, 1.9. Okay, so this orientation isn't that bad. Now let's go into a bit of a roll rotation, and again to watch to see if because as we roll, this is kind of a standard thing to do called a barbecue roll. So one side always doesn't stay in sunlight, although it also kind of messes with the orientation, what these guys want to see when they're docking or trying to observe something like the Earth. But anyway, so you'll see that this solar panel, as it moves out of ideal exposure to the sun, it's getting less power, and this one's getting more. So the balance of those are going to have some effect on this. So in practice right now, we're drawing slightly less charge from the batteries than we were at a previous orientation. So actually, let me just go at a faster speed, and you can see it wander between those two values, right? The maximum and the minimum draw. So I want to stop it at a position that's near that minimum. So it's not a huge difference, as you can see, but it over time it definitely has an effect. So in the meantime, I'll leave it because right now it averages out, which also isn't a bad thing. And I will drop that off because then you're at least not in the worst situation. And I'm going to need to cheat electric charge into the batteries anyway. Yeah, this blue battery, that's the size to get the 150, 160 kilograms or so that I wanted. All right, so we're going for a duration mission and a spacewalk. So let us stop this roll. Oh, yeah, fair enough. I suppose we're going to want to stop it. And yeah, sure, why not? Let's have it pointed that way. I don't know if you can actually connect a, you can probably connect pretty much any video game to a VR headset in some manner. Curious if you can kind of go first person with a Kerbal or not. It'd be kind of neat to do that. I don't have any VR hardware, but I'm curious if you could, because then you could kind of do the spacewalk yourself, which would be neat. So who are we going to send out first? Well, Kathy is doing her second flight into space, so she has the most experience. On the other hand, we've got the scientist. It's his first mission, so he's a little more expendable. So let's send him out. So go for EVA. So in practice, the Gemini, so these are doors. It's weird. Definitely, if you haven't seen a picture, I definitely recommend you look up a picture of what the Gemini craft looks like with humans. And this center line is it's kind of a hard barrier, and then these are two doors that open out. It's kind of like a car where, let's say, almost like reverse gull wing or something, where these two doors open up out, and then the crew can both people can come out independently. It's basically got two separate doors, and so they would open. One guy they both have to get secured into spacesuits, obviously, because sometimes they treated it like they called it a shirt sleeve environment. So they'd have the astronauts out with no suits, which is very, they found was quite necessary to be comfortable in such a small vehicle in space for 14 days. So they, I don't remember if they rotated back and forth between one guy not having a spacesuit and the other having a suit, which I can't imagine getting in and out of a spacesuit inside that. But they did that for experiments and for comfort, etc. So to do this, they had to open the capsule to a vacuum, so they both had to have spacesuits on, and then one of them was lucky enough to come out on an umbilical, and they did not have the, oh, I hit space, there we go, yep. All right, and they weren't lucky enough to have, what is it called? Sorry, I don't remember every acronym offhand at all times, unfortunately, but they didn't have it's not a PAM, but it's the backpack, basically, the life support system that's completely separate. Because effectively in this manner, this is all its own spacesuit, right? It has to keep you alive, regulate your temperature, give you air and water, etc. And they didn't have that technology at first, of course, because Gemini had the first Americans to spacewalk, and so they had an umbilical giving them electricity, and I'm not sure which other life support supplies were carried on that along the umbilical, whether it was just electricity and the rest of the hardware was on the suit, or whether the umbilical included air, etc. But so they had an umbilical to life support equipment inside the craft, and so with this design, they couldn't, say, have one person outside and close it and have the other person inside in a pressurized environment. So it's either the inside was pressurized entirely and both of the crew were inside, or it was unpressurized and one of them was outside in a spacesuit and one of them was inside in a spacesuit. But they did experiment with a little gas jet for a number of Gemini missions, which was really neat. It was kind of the first attempt at a maneuvering technology. It seemed like it was a pretty simple technology, just an early test. And they had a lot of difficulty with exhaustion during spacewalks. So it's the history of the Gemini craft is, I find, extremely interesting because it was a lot of American space firsts where they learned how to do work and live in space. And it's just kind of neat to see everything float. The Earth is moving below us at a very, very high speed. This is Africa because we just got into space a short period of time ago. All right, so is there any interesting science as this little space guy can do? Not that I can see. He should be able to take a report, I thought. Oh, his mouth is doing crazy things. I assumed he'd be able to take a crew report or something on himself, but that doesn't appear to be an option at the moment. So maybe I'll try EVAing in and out. I'll bring out Kathy as well. Yeah, I definitely recommend looking up the history of the first American spacewalks, and a lot of the space firsts done on Gemini ended up being pretty risky. All right, here we go. We are back in the craft, and we've got our video again. So he has done the first spacewalk, Dimitri here, and let's send out Kathy as well and see if she is able to. No, for some reason. Oh, there we go. Crew hatch. No, that's just showing the crew hatch. Yeah, it's not showing the ability to take an experiment, which I sort of assumed. Oh, there we go. I just had to click on the head in a certain way. Well, fair enough. I've never touched this, and I'm never tempted. I wince every time I think of pressing that button while out on EVA. Here we go. So EVA report. So Dimitri was the first scientist in space and the first Kerbal/astronaut to do a spacewalk, and Kathy is the one who took the useful data. All right, so she's not going to let go, risk-averse person as she is, so she's going to go back into the craft. All right, and then I'm going to carry out the 2 days of duration here. So let me pull up HyperEdit because we're going to have to edit the, let's see, there's a different way to do this. Let me see, I forget, is it one of these menus, infinite electricity? There we go. That's just probably an easier way to do it. So in practice, this battery module you see here is the right amount, the right mass for the Gemini batteries, which allowed them to stay in orbit for 2 and more days. And for longer duration missions, because Gemini dress rehearsal for many of the feats that needed to be accomplished for the Apollo program. They wanted to spend at least 14 days, 2 full weeks in space, and they were only able to do that with fuel cells, which I have not yet developed. Therefore, 2 days is as long as I'm going to keep people up here. All right. So sure, why not? Let's follow it for another orbit. Just let it tumble end over end. And we're going to go on to into the nighttime side. See, so notice that the sun only changes color very briefly, just literally because of that kind of red glop of atmosphere you see there, which kind of looks weird on the nighttime side, but I mean, fair enough. These aren't perfect simulations of cameras and low light conditions as you see them in space. I really love to watch the YouTube feed of Earth from space. Don't recall offhand what the experiment is called. Of course, it's a TLA or a FLA, 4-letter acronym or 3-letter acronym, for an experiment that has a pretty good HD camera on the ISS. There we go. So it has risen, and we can see. So it leaves a lovely pattern on the Earth, and the atmosphere changes color, and the clouds change color, and everything. But the sun itself doesn't quite change color the way we'd expect it to at the horizon, unfortunately. Whoa, did we oh yeah, I think we are dipping just a little low enough, right? Just like in one of those previous missions. So the actual Gemini would probably achieve orbit pretty similar to what we just did, and then it would adjust, let's say, if it wanted to be in a 300 by 300 orbit, it would have actual engines on it, such that it could lower this down to exactly 300, and then wait until it was at periapsis, wait until it was at 300, the apoapsis, and then also raise periapsis. And that was, again, an American first, having an engine that could change the parameters of your orbit and change them so precisely, and that allowed them to do something I hope to do with Gemini, which is use this technology, this on here to dock with an Agena or some other hardware, and potentially that's one way I can do. I can send Gemini towards the moon. I could one is, say, let's say Gemini Centaur, so it would basically be this, like, except well, looking like this with the actual fuel cells and the ability to live for 2 weeks in space, except you'd dock it up to a fully fueled Centaur or some other module that would be able to throw this towards the moon and do a flyby of the moon. Or an even more complicated module that would be able to throw it towards the moon and then also have an engine to slow down into lunar orbit and then break lunar orbit and come back to Earth. So that's kind of a medium mass. You can imagine that you'd have to build quite a bit bigger of a rocket or do some on-orbit construction in order to do a mission even just like that, just to do a flyby of the moon or get into orbit of the moon. And so I look forward to kind of planning and designing that, because I've done a number of those as kind of tests while I was helping to configure FASA and just kind of testing things out, where I did Gemini attached to a Centaur to the moon. All right. Oh yeah, I should probably turn on. I could see the carbon dioxide building up, so I should probably activate the CO2 scrubber. And so now we've been in space for 3 hours, so just a few orbits. So I'm going to switch camera modes so I don't get so dizzified. Close that. So what have we done? So it says vessel complete. Great. So I'll wait until this boops up, which should be at 2 days. We will be able to see that we have carried out our duration mission. So we've been in space for a day, and the Earth rotates under us that whole time. So this is the low point. So this is where we're going. This is the point we have to. We will lower this down into the atmosphere in order to come back to Earth. We've done more than our 2 days, and that is being checked off. All right, and now it's nicely over the ocean, so perfect. So I will deorbit it. It's nothing super special. The video is already at sufficient length. Thanks for watching. This has been RP-0 America, and I believe in the next mission in the next video, our Mars craft will have, our Mars probe will have reached Mars. So we will get to see what it does in the atmosphere of Mars, whether it just skims it and just as a flyby, whether the craft has the ability to catch enough atmosphere to aerobrake, so to, without using fuel, use the atmosphere of Mars to slow it down into the orbit of Mars, and then in reality you would do other burns once you were past the atmosphere of Mars to raise the periapsis, so you would only dip into the atmosphere as many times as you wanted to, one or just the one time or a few times to bring down to control your orbit. And that's been done on a number of actual craft, so which is really interesting, which is a really neat way of doing things. In practice, I'd like to have a craft in orbit of Mars before I sent something to actually try to land on Mars. Oh, and that's another potential option, is that we catch the atmosphere of Mars so hard and the craft also survives that we potentially try to land on Mars. So yeah, I look forward to seeing what actually ends up happening on that mission. So thanks for watching RP-0 America. Goodbye.